Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Biohacking Beauty podcast. My guest today is the amazing Cristian Drapeau, which I'm very, very excited to have this podcast with. Cristian holds a master's degree from McGill University in neurophysiology. He is the author of several scientific articles in the field of epilotogenesis, and more recently, in the fields of stem cell research, where he creates a new therapeutic approach called endogenous stem cell mobilization. Also, the author of the best-selling book, Cracking the Stem Cell Code. Cristian has created the concept of stem cell enhancement and has developed the first plant-based product supporting the natural role of stem cells in the body. So I think you can understand why I'm excited for this podcast. He has been the director of research and development for many companies and is now the founder and CEO of Collagen, where he formulated the stem cell supplement StemRegen. Today, we're going to deep dive into first, what are stem cells, how they help in the body, what happens with age, how they relate to aging, and how their decline relates to aging, which we are going to touch on skin aging specifically as well. And you'll learn first and foremost how you can address that problem, that issue, as part of your longevity and health optimization journey. We will learn about the specific product that he developed, which is called StemRegen, and how to use it. And you'll also learn what other strategies you can apply in order to enhance the viability of stem cells and their repair processes in the body. Before we dive into today's episode, I would just like to say that it would mean the world to me and to us here at the Biohacking Beauty podcast if you took 2 seconds out of your day to subscribe to the podcast. Not only does this ensure you will never miss on an episode, but it also greatly helps the growth of the podcast. And last but not least, before we dive into today's episode, I would like to remind you that this podcast is brought to you by Young Goose Skincare, the world's first biohacking skincare, where what we aim to do is to lower the functional age of the skin and then request or give the skin specific tasks for repair that now it has a higher ability to perform those tasks because it is more viable state. So we can tackle things like hydration, pigmentation, laxity, wrinkles, acne, glow, and more just skin health and longevity in general. So obviously this is a very exciting and very appropriate episode in order to tackle those issues. But without further ado, I'm very happy to welcome Cristian Drapeau. Okay, Cristian, welcome to the Biohacking Beauty podcast. I'm very, very excited, very happy to have you here.
My pleasure. Anytime.
So, we are talking today about something that I think everyone should be talking about when we talk about longevity in general, but especially when we are trying to look younger and have a full healthy life, which is stem cells. So first of all, I'm really excited to talk about this subject because this is one of the hottest topics that we have right now in longevity and in health span science. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
So maybe the first question we should ask before we get into more advanced topics is, what is a stem cell exactly? Because people here right now, you can inject it to your knees, and this guy did a full stem cell whatever. So what are stem cells?
Stem cells are cells that can become. Let me start by describing what is not a stem
Yeah.
cell, and it makes then stem cells very easy to understand.
Mhm.
All the cells of your body are referred to as somatic cells. They are cells that have a specific function, a specific identity. They will never transform into another type of cell, and they will, to an extent, never really multiply. They can multiply to an extent according to the Afleck limits
Mm-hmm.
that you have talked about before,
Mm-hmm.
but it's limited.
Yeah.
Uh, so stem cells are exactly the opposite, meaning a stem cell does not do anything in the body. It does not have any function. Its function is in its ability to transform into another type of cells.
Mm-hmm.
And they will self-replicate as stem cell. When they leave the bone marrow, they're no longer a bone marrow stem cells. They're slowly starting to obey, if there's such a thing as obeying, but they're ruled by the Aflic limit.
Mm-hmm.
Their telomeres will start to shorten, so their life is not immortal when they leave the bone marrow. But in the bone marrow, they are immortal. They will be there during the entire life of an individual. And their role essentially is that they will transform into asomatic cells.
Mm-hmm.
Historically, stem cells were precursors to blood cells. So their role was to transform into three major type of cells: red blood cells, lymphocyte, and platelets.
Mm-hmm.
The big discovery at the turn of the century that has given this thrust, if you want, of all this field of stem cell research is that stem cells were discovered to be able to transform not only into blood cells but also into cells of the brain, of the heart, of the liver, of the lung, of the skin, of essentially every single tissue of the body. Stem cells are the repair system of the body. That's really what they are.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I've heard you talk about this discovery before. So just to maybe understand what, because stem cells weren't discovered obviously in the early 2000s, right? We knew that there are stem cells. So what did we think before, and what changed in the early 2000s?
Let me give you the story, because I'm fascinated by this history of science. How do we discover
Mm-hmm.
things? And first, let's go back actually far, like about a little bit over a century, like around 1905. There was a Russian scientist looking at all. It's at the time when lymphocytes started to be documented. Microscopy to a degree that allowed to really see blood cells had been developed
Mm-hmm.
not long before. And then people start to look at what are these cells that are in the blood. And then you recognize that the one that you find in pus, for example, when you have a cut that has an infection, are the same that you find in the blood. So
Mm-hmm.
looking at all of this, they started to enumerate and draw all these different types of lymphocytes in the body. And then there's a guy that was pretty genius, and he started to realize that there are many kinds of cells, but if you look at them carefully, they all seem to point to a common lymphocyte that gives rise to all of them. And then he expressed this concept when he said there is in the bone marrow, in the blood, there is a cell that is, I don't remember the exact wording here, but basically is the mother cells of any other cells in the body.
Mm-hmm.
It can transform into everything. But at the time, it was too early. It was completely forgotten. Nobody did anything with it. And the concept came back after a nuclear incident. I believe it was in the Czech Republic.
Mm-hmm.
And this nuclear incident, a number of people were exposed to radiation. And we knew after Hiroshima that if you are exposed to radiation, you don't live very
Yeah.
long, because you don't have any more bone marrow, so you cannot make blood cells. So they knew that they would have to give blood transfusion to these people for the rest of their lives. But after one blood transfusion, they all start to make their own blood.
Mm-hmm.
So it brought back this concept that it looks like there is indeed this cell, this mother cells, that is the precursors to all the blood cells. So, and this whole concept developed in the 50s and the 60s, also with the development of embryology. We know that there is such a thing as a cell that will give rise to the full organism. So this concept of a stem cell, a mother cell, has been around since the 1950s, the 1960s. With the study on leukemia, we knew also that there was such of a cell in the bone marrow that could be disorganized and gave rise to a lot of excessive production of blood
Mm-hmm.
cells. And so the concept of a stem cell has been around for at least, I would say, since the early 60s, but always in the context of being precursors to blood cells. They did not have the ability to become anything else.
Mm-hmm. And then we advance a little bit forward, and we get to basically, I think, the golden, the rise of longevity science really, but more the looking into the mechanisms of what makes us up as humans, and kind of discoveries in that field. We the seminal paper in Cell magazine looking at hallmarks of aging, etc. But we discovered that stem cells are our repair mechanism, if you would, our most primordial repair mechanism. So, uh, what exactly was the discovery? Like, what do we now know that we didn't know before?
Okay. Um, if I start from your question as you phrased it, I believe that within the frame of what is longevity today, longevity science, and everything that we hear about, telomerase, biological age, DNA methylation, um, what is the name? NAD,
Yeah.
and all the science about these. It's fascinating, and yet I think that the actually most important element of this whole story of longevity science is stem cells, which is still vastly misunderstood,
Mhm.
or misunderstood for its potential.
Okay.
And where it started really is at the turn of the century, while doing studies on leukemia, while doing different kind of studies, people started to observe that stem cells had the ability of transforming into other types of cells. Typical study would be, example, you take a male, you extract stem cells from a male mouse that you inject into a female irradiated female mouse
Mhm.
to monitor the recovery of the bone marrow and the blood as a treatment for leukemia. And you can do that because since the stem cells are from a male mouse, they have the Y chromosome.
Mhm.
So you can follow the Y chromosome and in that way follow the reconstitution of the blood and the bone marrow. And it works. But then they discovered a brain cell with the Y chromosome, a heart cell with the Y chromosome, a liver cell with the Y chromosome. So it's by doing this kind of work that suddenly the fact that stem cells could become way more than just blood cells basically revealed this phenomenon in the body that has always been there, but we did not know about it, is that stem cells are actually the repair system of the body. Every time you've had an injury since the day you're born, you repair because your stem cells migrate to the area. They're called to the area of the injury through a very well described process, which is what I describe in my book, Cracking the Stem Cell
Mhm.
Code. It's all the science is in there describing this phenomenon. They are your repair system.
So, to repeat what you're saying, and correct me if I'm misunderstanding. Basically, stem cells are cells that have available to them our entire information in our genome. They can access the
Of course.
information is not hidden; it is revealed, and through a process of migrating to a specific tissue or becoming a specific tissue, they, in air quotes, forget, or the information that they do not need is becoming shut off, basically. And we can see that cells that were injected as cells with the full amount of information can then basically turn off information not needed and become any tissue in the body because of their the availability of of the information to begin with.
Let me put it this way. Think of an embryonic stem cell, the first cell that is going to turn into the full being that you are today. That cell has in its DNA what it needs to code for every single cell type, every single biological function in your body is into the DNA
Mhm.
of that one cell. That DNA does not change as you age. Of course, you have epigenetics, so it will be modified to an extent. But what I mean is that the blueprint of everything in your body is in that
Mhm.
DNA, which is going to be duplicated in all the cells of your body. So every single cell of your body has the entire DNA. That is why you can take today. That's what they do when they do what is called induced pluripotent stem cells. They take a cell, for example, of your skin, and they reactivate the genes that encodes for stem cell ness, if you want, and it makes the cell now revert back to a primitive state which you can then, by activating the part of its genome that encodes for heart cell, can push it now to become a heart cell. This is still in the genome. So now think of a stem cell from your bone marrow that is called by an injury. So you've got an injury, let's say a heart attack. Uh, your heart will send a signal, molecules, well documented, that will go to the bone marrow, trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. Stem cells are released. Now they will be attracted to the area where there is the injury. Stem cells will go there, will migrate into the tissue, and upon contact with proteins that are on the surface of cardiomyocytes. Every single type of stem cells have a protein that is specific to that tissue. That is how we identify cells today, by
Mhm.
using antibodies and cell markers. Every single cell types have those compounds. Those compounds that are specific to that tissue will touch the stem cells, and that will transfer to the nucleus of that cell what genes needs to be activated to make the stem cell transform into cells of that tissue, which is already in the genome. So the new cell will be no different than all the other cells of the heart.
Fascinating. Okay, but actually, we've touched. I have like five questions that I wanted to ask along the way because it's so, our conversation, it's like a stem cell. It can turn into anything. Anyway, so my first question is this: you talked about reverting cells back into their pluripotent state, or the uh, um, a state that can become anything, so we can kind of revert them. Are you referring to the research done on the Yamanaka factors? Is that the way it
Correct.
is done? Okay, so the Yamanaka factors are genes that we've discovered that if we activate them, we can basically rewind stem cells to their youthful state, and that is part of the way that we can prove, in air quotes, that the genetic information to our ultimate self, or whatever, to the youthful true self that we are, is held in genes, or in our DNA for eternity, or for life, basically, which is really cool. Now, when you talk about stem cells migrating and becoming a tissue to respond to an injury, um, anyone who looked into getting stem cells, as a treatment, their own stem cells as a treatment for an injury, such as myself, when I had a knee injury and I had bone marrow aspirate re-injected into my knee, would know that the older you get, the doctor would like to, or whoever injects you would like to proliferate those or culture those stem cells that they've extracted from you. And we can obviously have a full discussion about US regulation. But before we do that, I think the question that needs to be asked is: we have those stem cells in our bone marrow, but as far as I am told, they dwindle with age. Their concentration lowers with age.
Mhm. Correct.
Okay, and when we respond to that injury, is the reason older people, let's say, respond to injury or recover from injury less well, is because they're getting less stem cells to that area? How does that mechanism happen? How does the body decide, in air quotes, how many stem cells are being sent? Or how does this system maintain itself over time, not to exhaust itself? Or what can we do not to exhaust it, etc.?
Mhm. There are many
Yeah.
questions in your question. So stick with me. I will try to answer
Of
all of
course,
them
yeah.
into sort of the story of how your stem cells work in your
Hmm.
body. So you are born with red marrow.
Hmm.
Red marrow in a newborn, the entire bone marrow is red. As you age fairly rapidly, the red marrow starts to convert into yellow marrow or fatty marrow. That happens fairly rapidly. By age 15, you've lost probably 50% of your red marrow. By age 30, you've lost 90 to 95% of your red marrow. Think of your entire skeleton made out of red marrow as you're born,
Hmm.
but in your long bones, it recedes or converts very rapidly, so that at the age of 30, you have red marrow only into the head of the femur, of the long bones, and into your flat bones,
Mhm.
pelvis, sternum, ribs, and skull. And it continues to transform and convert as you age into yellow marrow. So the amount of stem cells that you have in your bloodstream is a direct correlation of how much red marrow that you have. Think of your red marrow as being, uh, it's not like an absolute truth, but think of your bone marrow as being constant, if you want, in producing stem cells. It's just that the bank shrinks as you age. So it may be as productive, but you have less of it
Yeah.
that is productive. So it leads in your bloodstream to a sharp decline in the number of stem cells in your blood circulation available for repair. And that is why when you say when old people cannot repair as well, we don't have to be that old. Already in your 30s, you don't repair like you did when you
Yeah.
were 15. And that's kind of about the time when we wake up one day and realize we're not Superman and Wonder Woman anymore. Um, Things are not like they used to. That's because at some point in our 30s, we cross that balance between how many cells we lose as part of normal process of tissue turnover and decline and aging and everything, and how much stem cells we have in our bloodstream to offset and replace that cellular loss. When we lose that balance, that is when we start to age, if you want. And there's a direct link between how many stem cells is in your bloodstream and your ability to repair. Let me give you an example. All of this is published. Different people show up at the hospital for a stroke. And when they arrive at that hospital, some doctors were interested in stem cells. So they quantified how many stem cells they have in their blood to begin with on the day of the stroke. And then 6 weeks later, they separated the people in two groups. People who had a really good outcome, meaning they resume a normal life and they're productive, like they're back to where they were before. And the other group, physical therapy, aphasia, paralysis, whatever. They're left with something, they're in
Mhm.
rehabilitation of some kind. Those people have half the number of stem cells compared to the people who had a good outcome. You can take any example. You get a broken bone, you get the person in 6 weeks, it's perfectly healed. The other one has not healed very well.
Mhm.
The difference is that the person who does not repair well has fewer stem cells in circulation. So it becomes so relevant to put more stem cells in circulation to help the body repair. And the last part to this whole explanation or this answer to your question is that is repair, meaning stem cells are the repair system of the body. But in the background, they're way more than the repair.
Mhm.
To me, this other function, silent function that they play, is actually more important than the repair because you're not broken most of your life. You're broken at some parts of your life. Most of your life, you're just going along and you're just aging. Well, every day you lose cells, and your ability to replace the cells depends on how many stem cells are in the blood. If you cannot replace all the cells that are being lost, you slowly accumulate a deficit every day. That deficit accumulates over time to any one of the so-called age-related diseases. So you count the number of stem cells in people with high blood pressure, atherosclerosis, heart disease, diabetes, emphysema, liver failure, kidney failure, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, Parkinson, Alzheimer's. The list is growing. These people all have, on average, less than half the number of stem cells that you find in people, healthy people of the same age.
And the
There's a direct correlation. The core factor that makes you age is your decline in your ability to stay healthy.
Beautiful. I mean, I love it. Obviously, here in this podcast, we end up talking a lot about the end case, right? The end of lifespan, basically. But we infer a lot of the things that we care about while we are alive and functioning, like the health of our skin or the appearance of youth, as it relates to that, as it correlates to that. And a lot of the times, when we are talking about aesthetic procedures, about stimulation for repair in our skin, which is essential to appearing younger, um, we are talking about a balance between stimulation for repair and the ability of the skin to repair itself, which, to maybe to encourage people to, and we're going to talk about how we can release more stem cells from the bone marrow. Um, the way that our skin looks and the way it recovers, the way it regenerates, is directly affected from the availability of stem cells as well, right?
Absolutely. Not only that, but the relevance of having more stem cells in your bloodstream in order to stay healthy is proportional to the turnover rate of a tissue. You get about let's say about half of a new heart every 25 years.
Hmm.
The brain has not been very well documented, but you have a new liver every 2 3 years. So absolutely. So there's an important role of stem cells in the skin. Stem cells are important for every single tissue. We need to keep in mind this phenomenon of turnover.
Hmm.
You get, for example, half of a new heart every 25 years. The brain is not as clear. Actually, very few studies have been done to document the phenomenon. These are all incidental
Yeah.
observations in studies that slowly reveal this phenomenon. Your entire body is constantly in a process of turnover. But your skin is every month.
Hmm.
Every month you have a new skin. Think about the amount of stem cells that is consumed by your skin, because when a stem cell gets into the skin, now it becomes an epidermal stem cell. That epidermal stem cells is now a tissue committed stem cells. As a tissue committed stem cells, it is slowly ending its identity as a stem cell and is slowly starting to be committed to the path of becoming something in the skin: keratinocytes, hair follicles, sebaceous gland, sweat glands, any of the components of a healthy skin. This is ruled by the stem cells in your skin. If you exhaust stem cells in your skin, you stop the ability of your skin to rejuvenate and renew itself in a healthy way.
Hmm.
And that is why the skin age, because having fewer stem cells in circulation, you have less of an opportunity to replenish the stem cell layer in the skin. Now put more stem cells in circulation, and you basically rejuvenate your skin. So we have a product. I guess, and I hope we'll have time to talk about it. But that's what it does. It puts more stem cells in circulation. People will use it for all kinds of things, but the most common uh, testimonial and story that we get is, I took your product for whatever problem, but everybody is looking at me and they're asking me what I'm doing because I look more radiant. And that's because we simply provide more stem cells to replenish the skin.
Hmm.
Anything that you will do for your skin, take all the product in Young Goose that will stimulate the skin, add to this a supply of stem cells, you magnify what the products can do.
And that is why you are here, Christian, because no, aside from the fact that this is an extremely interesting topic and we believe that everyone should know about it, the reason you're here is because there is a not even a direct correlation, the correlation between the way that we look and our overall health is the ability of the body to respond to stimulation. If we can really zero in on it, before we get to the strategy that you have, which I use personally to encourage stem cell supply, let's call it like that, to the skin and to our body. I want to ask you about the difference between you mentioned the mice that we could follow stem cell. So Christian, I have a question that I obviously that's something very popular right now, having stem cells or umbilical cord stem cells or placental stem cells injected into our body. So stem cells that are not our own, similar to what you were saying about mice, etc. Is there a different functional difference between the way our body uses stem cells that are not innate to us and stem cells that it has created on its own, stem cells that have our DNA associated with them?
The real answer to that question is that the field is too early. The real answer is that I don't think that this has been fully studied to a full extent.
Mhm.
What we know is that stem cells are not immunogenic. So when you do an organ transplant and you can have rejection, it is not a phenomenon that you will have with stem
Mhm.
cells. So from that point on, it is fine to get stem cell injected from another source. Now, granted, now all these cells have the DNA from another source. And when we understand the turnover rate of tissues, which means essentially that after, let's say, 5 years after you got a significant injection of stem cells from another source, that means that tissues like your skin, like your intestine, like your liver, will be to a large extent will be recreated, renewed, if you want, with another DNA
Hmm.
to an extent. Um, Cells can do exchange of DNA, but the full extent of these, I don't think, is very well understood. So that's something that is in the background, but I don't think anybody has really studied these things, like what is the real impact of all this on health.
Hmm.
So question mark, so we don't know about this. When you get, I would say, it was not in your question, but somewhere buried in your question is also the reason as to why would you do something
Yeah.
like this, like why would you get stem cells from another source. And I think it has to do a lot with a concept that has been popularized over the past few years, that not only do you have fewer stem cells in circulation as you age, but the quality of these stem cells decline with age. With even statements out there, I know because many people come with that
Hmm.
question. I believe the question comes, at least in part, from a book by Tony Robbins, which is a great book. But in that book and in some of the videos that came off of this book, um, there's a statement that is completely false.
Hmm.
Is this idea is that past 40 years of age, your stem cells sort of fall down the cliff and they become useless. I can tell you, I've been working in this field now for 20 years. I have developed various products that trigger the release of stem cells from your own bone marrow, putting more stem cells in circulation, but they're your own. And we have phenomenal recovery from various kinds of problems with people who are 55 years old and above, 80 years old, and they have good results. So, this idea that your stem cells are worthless after 40 years old or 50 or 60 years old will be almost like asking a 60-year-old, well, you're obviously not as effective performance wise as you were when you were 20. So, does that mean that you are worthless?
Hmm.
Of course not. So your stem cells are the same. They are still effective. And if you put more stem cells in circulation at any age, more stem cells are available to participate to tissue repair. To me, with everything that I have seen so far, your own stem cells are still the best thing for you. But if you decide, in your 60s, 70s, you decide, I would like to give a boost of rejuvenation to the body, I might even myself consider, a little bit later in life, to get umbilical cord stem cells or
Hmm.
placental stem cells as sort of a reseeding with young stem cells, in the bone marrow. But there are a lot of questions that are unanswered. To me, the safest thing to do right now is autologous stem cells, your own stem cells. Not to say that using umbilical cord stem cells does not work or is not good, just some question marks that have not been fully answered.
Beautiful, beautiful explanation. And yeah, obviously, we can really use our logic now after this conversation. We can understand that our body really relies on stem cells in order to maintain organ health, any organ, and some organs, as you mentioned, are completely new after a couple years, 3 years. Obviously, we're not even talking about blood cells, which are renewed every 120 days, but just using inferring from our logic, we understand that we would not be living for very long if our stem cells wouldn't have this ability to tap into our initial information of youth. That there's no other mechanism in the body. There's no flash drive that we can put into our body and remind itself what it used to be, yet maybe. But connecting to this and to our own stem cell production, etc. This is where I am fascinated with your product, which is called Stem Regen. So I would like to know how you started developing it, w- how you discovered basically that the molecules within it, the compounds within it, can help. I'd love to hear the story. So now we get to the real reason I got you here, and my evil plan is being revealed. That I am extremely impressed by your solution to stem cell mobilization. As someone who has really taken upon themselves to formulate products that address fundamental causes of aging, and that really is a road that is not often traveled. I'm thoroughly impressed with the product that is called Stemregen that you've developed. So um, maybe before we get to what's inside, etc., what does it do? What is the end result, or what is the end result biologically in our body that we get by using Stemregen?
You have a certain number of stem cells in your bloodstream naturally.
Hmm.
We all have. The Through all the studies that we have done, what we have seen in our lab is a very wide range. So somebody comes in the lab, we count the number of stem cells in circulation, and it's going to be between zero point 0.1 cells per microliter, sorry, zero point 0.5 cells per microliter to 5 stem cells per microliter. This is a broad,
Hmm.
broad range. So, what science is telling us is that your body's ability to repair depends directly uh, on how many stem cells you have in your bloodstream that are available to participate to tissue repair. So, what the product does, quite simply, is that it supports this natural phenomenon that you do every day anyway, which is the release of stem cells from your own bone marrow, so that 2 capsules of stem regen will put in your own blood circulation an additional anywhere between, let's say, 6 to 10 million additional stem cells in circulation on that day when you take the product. It's really that simple.
I understand. And does that depend on that, again, reservoir of red bone marrow, or not, or it's the average is maintained throughout the ages, basically?
The number of stem cells that you have in your bloodstream is most likely a correlation of how much red marrow that you have left in your bone and how much this red marrow is productive. And when I say that it's not productive, it doesn't mean that it's not healthy. It's just that it's one of those interpersonal variations. It's just what you're dealt with your genetics, with whatever. This is your red marrow.
Hmm.
So, when we do the work, we count the number of stem cells as a proportion of lymphocytes. So when I'm telling you, 6 to 10 million stem cells, I'm normalizing on the average number of stem cells that we find in the population of people that we have
Hmm.
worked with. If I give you the data as it is, it's more something like 60 to 80% increase in the number of circulating stem cells. So the actual number of stem cells can vary greatly from one person to another. But the conclusion here across the board after 20 years of doing this work is that at any point in your life, if you can put more stem cells in circulation, your body will use them. And if you happen to be somebody that is at the lower end of stem cells, you will release fewer stem cells, but your body is going to just use them even more so because they're needed in
Yeah.
many places in the body. So the number can vary. The proportion is roughly about 60 to 80% increase in the number of circulating stem cells.
Wow. So I'm extremely interested. How did you get to it? Like, what was the process of understanding that phenomenon? The ingredients that would benefit the release of stem cells. How did it come about?
So probably the best way to answer this question, Anita, is to give you the story
Yeah,
of
please.
how I got to where I am because my background originally is neuroscience, neurophysiology. So I was doing studies and work on memory and epilepsy at the Montreal Neurological Institute. And I was hired in 1995 by a company that was selling at the time a blue green algae called Aphanisum plus aqua, in short AFA, that grows naturally in Klamath Lake. So it's normally known as Klamath Lake blue green algae. So I was hired to document the mechanism of action behind the health benefits of that plant. And this was just after the passage of the DSHEA, the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act. And companies needed to have data to support any of the claims that they were making. So the claims were about immune support, inflammation, and mental support. So we found all the active ingredients. After a year or two, all of this was done. It was great. But I came across a number of cases of people who reversed. Not only the extent of the recovery was impressive, but reversed problems that were touching so many different aspects of human health.
Hmm.
People reversing from serious heart problem, cardiovascular problem, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson, liver failure, diabetes, Alzheimer's, multiple sclerosis. I think I mentioned it,
Hmm.
emphysema. So at the end, it was like, what can this plant be doing to get benefits to the liver, to the lung, to the heart, to the brain, to so many different aspects of human health? So it was a question, and to which we really did not have an answer at the time. It was not definitely not because of any of the active compounds that we had identified at the time. So what was it? So we did a number of studies, one in affiliation with Harvard University, University of Mississippi, University of Albuquerque in New Mexico. We got great data, but at the end of the day, nothing that really explained what it was until one day, a colleague of mine sent me a paper. The title was Turning Blood into Brain, a study on leukemia in which scientists injected male stem cells into female mice to test as a treatment for leukemia. And you can follow the new bone marrow stem cells because they have the Y chromosome. They
Yeah.
come from a male cell, a male from an animal, and then they found a neuron in the brain that had the Y chromosome. The first observation that a stem cell from the bone marrow can go to the brain. So we are in 2001 at a time when not only stem cells cannot become cells of any other tissue, but you certainly cannot make new brains. This is in
Hmm.
neurology, this is like the dogma: the brain does not regenerate. And here's evidence that not only the brain regenerates, but it comes from stem cells from the bone marrow. So I went in the scientific literature at the time, not available on the internet, so the local medical library,
Hmm.
and start to look at, is there any other data showing the same thing? And I found another article talking about how stem cells could become liver cells and heart cells. So to me, what it was at the time was, well, if stem cells can become heart, liver, and brain, why not pancreas, lung, the skin, and the rest? They have
Yeah.
to. You cannot have a physiological mechanism that makes stem cells become heart, liver, and brain and not the rest. And if they do, and it's just a matter of time, that means they have to be the repair system of the body. How do you want a stem cell to go to the brain, become a brain cell, and it's not its function? So
Yeah.
it has to be that they are the repair system. So we published an article in a journal, Medical Hypotheses, suggesting in 2001, suggesting that stem cells are the repair system of the body. In the back of my mind, what if that plant that we're working with, Klamath Lake blue green algae, its main mechanism of action is to be a stem cell mobilizer? It triggers the release of stem cells from the bone marrow. So we acquired a flow cytometer, developed the lab, started to count stem cells on ourselves at the beginning. So we would take our own blood sample, count the number of stem cells, then take this blue green algae and count the number of stem cells an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours later. And that's when we discovered the whole phenomenon. Blue green algae from Klamath Lake, AFA, is a stem cell mobilizer. So that's really how we identified the first plant.
Hmm.
And when that came out, then you would tell scientists, well, we have a plant now that increased the number of stem cells. And the answer is unanimously, so what? What does it mean? It means absolutely nothing. So we had to show it may be just like a normal fluctuation in the body. So we had to document the mechanism of action, we had to document to isolate the active compound, and we had to use an animal model to show that this product will actually enhance tissue repair. So we did all of that. All of this was published. But then in the back of my mind, if we evolved in symbiosis with the environment, it cannot be that there's only one plant that has an effect on stem cells. There
Hmm.
has to be other plants. So how do you find them? You look at the plants that have been historically associated with a broad variety of health benefits, and we test them in the lab. Medicinal mushroom, goji berry, fauti in the traditional Chinese medicine, those kinds of plants. And then after that, we find they all have an effect on stem cells, but we did not find like a real winner. So we then went into remote areas of the world, like in Papua New Guinea, in Madagascar, in the Congos, in Africa, in South America. What are they using locally? What plant do they use that for them is associated with a broad variety of health benefits. And let's go and test them. And
Mhm.
that's where we discovered some of the stars that we have right now with sea buckthorn berry extract, aloe macroclada from Madagascar. These are the two main plants that we have now in stem regen. So that's how we moved on and identified so far about five good stem cell mobilizers.
And
That's how we made it.
that's amazing. Did you look mainly at stem cells in circulation, or did you also take into account things like half life? Like, did you look at some kind of adaptation in the body where the stimulus is subsiding after a while? Is there anything um, aside from correlating the actual plant and the amount of stem cells in circulation after ingestion that you looked at when you were formulating it?
I mean, it's the only thing that we looked at for a matter of when you do a protocol and you start to stack too many measurements on the protocol, there's
Yeah.
a point where you almost lose the power of your protocol to look at one specific thing.
Hmm.
So we measure because at some point in time, I thought it might also help red blood cell formation,
Hmm.
immune cell formation. So we may have a stronger immune system. We do not.
Hmm.
We have seen that it stimulates some ingredients, stimulates like AFA stimulates NK cell function, NK cell migration, but outside of that, there's not really a change in the population of red blood cells, white blood cells.
Hmm.
We looked at markers like CPR, for example, marker of inflammation. We do see a decrease in a number of individual, but nothing here that was really earth shattering. Outside of that, we have not looked at anything other than what we're quantifying in the bloodstream. We focused really on stem cells. So we looked as well what is today called V cells, very small
Yeah.
embryonic like stem cells. They have been named different. They have received different names in over the development of all this science. It was first isolated in the early 2000, in fact, 2001, I believe, by I believe it was Bob Young, I believe.
Hmm.
But anyway, Dr. Young, and at the time it was called blastomere-like stem cells. Blastomere being the embryo. So they receive various names, but essentially they are very very small stem cells that are present that are about the size of a platelet. So when you extract platelet in the infamous platelet rich plasma, then you also have those small stem cells. So
Hmm.
PRP is not just platelet and growth factors. They have a very, very potent type of stem cells, which is these V cells. So we've also started to count V cells, and all the ingredients that we have studied so far, they all have also an effect on V cells, increasing the number of V cells and also activating about 50% of them. So some of this was published, some of that data was not published. So that's really the focus of what we measured when we did these studies.
That's incredible. Yeah, and V cells obviously are the hotter topic right now in our fringe hyper wellness field, as far as people, getting their own V cells re-injected into them. But there's controversy around it because of the way in which um, they have more higher V cell content expressed in order to harvest it. So the fact that you can do it naturally is I'm sure is going to be a very important part of cell regen as the science progresses and as our field progresses. So what should one expect to get from stem regen? I'll be honest. I'm doing a month now of taking triple the dose. I'm an extreme case. But what should one expect by taking two pills once a day?
Okay. So just before going there, Amite, just on what you were talking before, V cells
Hmm.
and the main treatment right now that is available in terms of taking out the V cells, exposing them to light to essentially stimulate them, putting them back in the body, which is a great treatment. But what we're trying to do here, and we might have a in the not too distant future, a companion product with StemRegen, which is simply to basically wear on your wrist where you have thin skin and exposure to your blood vessels, basically have those lights that are going to illuminate the blood vessels. So as you release the V cells, then over probably a period of like 5-10 minutes, all your blood will have passed in that area.
Mhm.
And if you wear it for longer, then it will be more than one passage. And you basically can start to activate these cells in vivo as they are in your bloodstream after releasing them. So we're starting to work on stacking different technologies like this that are going to
Yeah.
optimize essentially the role of stem cells in the body. Um, this being said, what should someone expect? The first thing to understand is that you release stem cells every day. If you did not release stem cells every day, you would not be alive today.
Hmm.
They are essential for the maintenance of your, I mean, of your life.
Yeah.
Uh, I will give you sort of a extrapolations here because no studies or very few studies have been done to study that specifically. But when you look at the turnover rate of a tissue, we will see that you will see that we have about a new liver every 2-3 years.
Yeah.
Your heart, you have half of a new heart every 25 years. You will have new lungs every 4 to 6 years. When we look at the turnover rate of pneumocytes, for example, in the lung, so let's get out now of these numbers. The concept is that you're constantly in turnover, meaning you
Yeah.
lose cells, you need to replace them. If you don't release stem cells, you can no longer replace the cells that are being lost. You are going very quickly to start to develop dysfunction in main vital organs. Your
Yeah.
stem cells are absolutely essential for your health and your survival. So when you release them and you put more in circulation, your body will use them. The
Yeah.
question is, are the stem cells going to go where I want with my mind and my needs are where I want them to go? Let's say I want to go to my brain, I want them to go to my heart or to my knee. Are they going to go there? They may go other places. They may be called because they will migrate
Hmm.
wherever there's a signal that is sent. Whenever there's an organ that is not functioning properly or has damages, injury, whatever, that area will locally release specific compounds that when stem cells circulate into the fine capillaries of that area, and these compounds touch the stem cells, it makes the stem cells migrate in the tissue where they will do tissue repair.
Yeah.
So they may go not where you want them. So that's what we need to work on right now, develop strategies where we can help stem cells go where we want them to go. This being said, maybe your body has a priority that is better than your priority that you have in your mind. Maybe you want them to go to your knee, but the body says, you know what, you need them in your heart right now. You may not know it
Yeah.
because you're not pushing yourself to experience heart failure, but your heart needs them right now. So I'm saying this because when you ask the question, what can people expect? The first thing that they can expect, and it will happen, your body will use these stem cells for
Yeah.
tissue repair and health maintenance, no question. So now, but that's not the answer that you want to receive when you're asking your question. The question that you have is, what am I going to feel with this product? In the realm of what you'll feel is that if you have any problem that is like knee pain, whatever it is that you have somewhere in your body, I would say make that area signal. So if you say, well, when I squat, I'm having some discomfort here and there, well, squat then. Within an hour of taking the product, squat, make that area, I'm not going to say make, create pain, make it signal so
Yeah.
that it releases a signal that stem cells will listen to and will migrate in that tissue. So do something to activate the area if you want. So that's one thing to do. So what people will find is anything that is damaged, signals for repair, stem cells will go there. So expect to feel improvement. As I said before, there are many things in your body that if you don't test them, you may not notice the improvement. If you look at insulin production, you may not feel it until or unless the lack of proper insulin production gives you a symptoms that you can feel. Then
Yeah.
okay, maybe you will feel something. So that's one thing to understand. What we have seen over the years is that the people you really want to put the product to the test go to the gym and just like wreck yourself. Just do something that you know the day after you will probably not be able to walk normally, and then take two stem regen after, before you go to bed, and in the morning after, and you will see then what stem cells can do to help your body repair. You cannot miss it. So that's when people can see what their stem cells are doing for them. And then in terms of benefits, I mean, we have seen small benefits. We have seen people coming back and say, I don't feel anything, but people are asking me what I'm doing because my skin looks more radiant. Your skin renews every month. It's going to be one of the largest user of stem cells. That's why we were talking about earlier as a great complement to Young Goose's product, is that as you help regeneration of the skin with topical products, well, the basics, the fundamentals of skin repair is stem cell migrating into the skin and then being supported in their role of tissue repair. So people can see it there in their skin. But basically, anything that needs repair, your stem cells will participate to the repair of what is needed.
It's beautiful. That's so you basically have just described the reason this podcast exists, right? To have people use strategies that in the end our products work better. That's my joke is that's the evil plan of the podcast, right? So a few things that I really, really liked in what you're saying. First of all, it's very similar to the Angus story because when we started, we had a moisturizer that increased NAD in the skin and activated these longevity pathways in the skin. But the problem was is that it did not have any signal for repair. So we were improving the skin of people that desperately needed support. But company now revolves around those signals of repair. So obviously, uh, um, our products would greatly benefit from a person using StemRegen. That's number one. Number two, what I like even better is what you said about getting benefits where you wouldn't necessarily aim to get benefits at, because um, if it's from stories along the ages of people doing ultra marathons and then one day at age 57 collapsing and dying, whether it is people who believe that they're at the peak of health and developing type 2 diabetes or Alzheimer's, dementia, whatever that is, we are all basically living on borrowed repair time, if we would. What aging
That's a
is,
good way of putting it.
yeah, what aging is to me on the most fundamental level is the accumulated of unrepaired damage. That is it. We can then give it, different names, different labels throughout the body, but it is that tipping point where our body I wouldn't say give up, it's nano gives up, right? Like it's microscopically giving up one cell at a time. So that is why I believe Semergen is so important as a longevity strategy. Not as a lot of the times we conflate peak performance and longevity, and they can in the Venn diagram. There is a lot of uh, parallels, but when we extrapolate throughout our lifetime, they sometimes actually stand in almost in antagonistic approaches, where one would be ex- e- using the most amount of energy for us to succeed at a specific task right now. And I had a discussion about it with Chris Mirable, which is the founder of a company called Novos, which is a longevity company. Sometimes when we express all our energy at a single moment to excel at something, what we are giving up is a lot of ability of the body to repair. So to have a product that also gives you some kind of benefits after a specific workout in the gym, but also that communicates with the body in a way in a way which is innate to the body. It's not like a exogenous steroid or something like that. This is something that is plugging into a system that is already working in the body but is supercharging it. This to me is the magic of the product. So yeah, so as far as protocol, what is a protocol for you know general maintenance? Is it something people should take for the rest of their lives? And then are there times where you would recommend more, where you would recommend less?
Uh, your question really complements very well what you just said before, because what you said before is, I mean, it's said almost better than I say it. It's really what you said is right on point. Any problems that you develop down the road is always the accumulation of small lack of repair that have accumulated over years. Daily small lack of repair that you do not experience, they're too small. They accumulate. Every single problem is the result of that.
Yeah.
You count the number of stem cells in the bloodstream of people who have developed, I won't name the diseases,
Yeah.
but problems of the heart, of the cardiovascular system, of the lung, of the kidney, of the pancreas, of the brain, of the skin, of joints. All these people have on average less than half the number of stem cells that you find in someone of the same age that does not have these problems. All the so-called age-related problems, the people who develop them all have half the number of stem cells that you find in healthy people. So that means that every day, the difference is that those who are healthy as they age, every day they were better able to do this day-to-day repair. So once we understand this, then I want every day of my life to give my body a better ability to repair. So to me, it's a product that you take every day. I have been taking it every day for the past 20 years since we did our first discovery with this blue green algae extract. So I've been taking it every day. So the best way to take it, I would say, when you start, because most people start when they have a problem. It's rare that somebody will really uh, do something for their health that is very significant just because they want to keep their health. I mean, with the in the biohacking community, it's obviously something that is growing,
Yeah.
is much more common. But generally speaking, people start when they have a problem. I
Hmm.
would say, given that these problems are to a large extent the accumulation of small daily lack of repair, you probably need to give your body a boost of repair. So I would say take two capsules 2, 3 times a day, spread that over the day. Once you release stem cells, they will have about a 6 hours residence time in your bloodstream. So try to do this, let's say, every 6 hours, or let's say when you get up midday and before you go to bed, as an example. And then see what your body will do with these additional stem cells, and do this for maybe 1 to 4 weeks. See how it works for you. Then you can decrease to once or twice a day and see if you feel less. If you feel less, maybe you need to continue a little bit at that sustained level. And then after that, when you've got the benefits that you're looking for, or your body has done the best using these stem cells, you can go on a maintenance dose of 2 capsules a day. So that's probably the best way to take the product.
Hmm. Awesome. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. So maybe for to kind of close the discussion up, let's talk about risks. Normally, when we travel down the allopathic medicine route, but not only allopathic medicine, when we're looking at something that is maybe derived from nature, but we're starting to refine its action more and more, we are getting what some would call side effects. I would just call them effects. It's just not the effect that we want. Um, it, Obviously, I'm biased because I believe in whole plants like the ones that you use. But what is the risk, if any, that we have by taking it? And is there anyone that shouldn't take it?
Yeah, there are many angles to answer that question. All I would say is that regardless the angle that we take, at the end of the day, the answer is that there's really nothing.
Yeah.
There's no side effects or unwanted results, if you want. But let's go a little bit at it. Let's start to take it by the angle of the plant. You talk about natural plants.
Hmm.
When we choose to study a plant, the reason why we're studying it is because that plant has a long history of use and with many different kinds of benefits. That's
Yeah.
why we choose it and we test it. So you take the seabuckthorn berry, 2,000 years in Tibetan medicine, Mongolian medicine, actually more than that, and in traditional Chinese medicine. Aloe macroclada, used centuries in Madagascar. You look at any of the plants that we have in the formulation, they've all been used for long periods of time with a very good track record of safety.
Yeah.
So right there from the start, these plants are safe.
Yeah.
They've always had an effect on stem cells. We're not discovering something. We develop, we discover an understanding that is
Yeah.
new. It's releasing stem cells, but they have been releasing stem cells for the past 2,000 years when people were using them. And if there was any kind of negative effect, it would be documented in the use of these plants. So there's no history of any side effects. The only thing is that now we discover a new mechanism of action. Now that we have this mechanism of action, it brings a number of questions, which are fair and relevant questions. Can we then exhaust the bone marrow? The answer is no. We can answer it in so many different ways. Let me just take a few ways of answering it. Athletes, you release a lot of stem cells. There's only one set of circumstances in life when you release a lot of stem cells. It's hyperbaric chamber or doing very, very intense workout. Like go run a marathon, do a
Hmm.
1 hour session of rowing, and you will release stem cells as a response to the micro injuries that have been done into your muscles, ligaments,
Yeah.
tendons. So it's a healing response, but you release stem cells. Are athletes running out of stem cells at some point in their life? Of course not. It's preposterous. You do not run out of stem cells. Stem cell exhaustion is a phenomenon of your tissue when they're not properly replenished because you don't release enough stem cells. In your bone marrow, you have red marrow until the day that you die. It decreases, but it's there and it's productive. So there's no effect at all on your bone marrow. Studies were done. I won't go into all the detail, but the question was, let's say you have no bone marrow anymore. Can one stem cells reconstitute the bone marrow? Again, I won't go into the detail. It's a fascinating study, a little complex, but at the end of the day, one single stem cells can in 6 weeks completely reconstitute the bone marrow. So if you have about 150 million stem cells in your bone marrow and you release 10 million, the 140 million that are left will not have a problem to maintain homeostasis in your bone marrow. If there are any side effects or things to just know, blue green algae contains vitamin K. So if somebody is on Coumadin or any so-called vitamin K blockers for blood fluidity, blood thinner,
Uh-huh.
then it could have an interaction. However, other ingredients in there have been documented to thin the blood, to increase blood fluidity. At the end of the day, it's really not a thing that we have seen over the years. Like virtually nobody has come and say it really had an impact. But for the sake of being safe, I would say start, if you are on blood thinners that are blockers of vitamin K, then start taking stem regen maybe a week or two before your next visit to the doctor, and he will say if there's a change in your blood fluidity, and if there's need to be an adjustment to your prescription, so be it. It could happen. This is one of the things that could happen. The other thing to monitor is that if you start to really repair tissues, there might be something that you're doing in your life from a prescription base that may now not be needed. Let's say that you have a sluggish thyroid or a thyroid gland and you take Synthroid or artificial T3,
Hmm.
T4. Well, if you regenerate your thyroid gland, the drug then is in excess. It's going to create problems. So you may have to follow all of these parameters, see with your doctors. There's a point where you may not need to have those kinds of exogenous molecules. These are the things to really look for.
Yeah.
There's one thing to know, and I don't have really an explanation to it other than calling it a healing crisis, which could be what it is, but healing crisis to me as a scientist is just like taking your problem, putting a label on it, and kind of getting rid of it by putting a label on it. Now you called it a healing crisis. It's still not clear why you have this healing crisis, but for lack of a better explanation, people who have joint problems, joint pain, fibromyalgia type problem, it is not uncommon. Maybe 10-15% of the people, they will first experience a worsening of their condition. I have the sister of a good friend of mine. It's exactly what happened to her. And I told her, it's okay. Don't get discouraged. Stick with it. Give it a week or two. It will pass. She did it. She said her life was miserable for 2-3 weeks, and now her life is so much better in terms of quality of life. We're talking about somebody who has a farm, and she could work in the garden, on the land until about noon. After this, her fingers were just too painful, her feet were too painful. She could no longer function for the rest of the day. She's now working all day long on the land.
Wow.
I will not say everything is eliminated in her life, But I mean, her quality of life, her productivity is like night and day compared to what it was. But she had to go through that phase. It is something that is reported at times. That's pretty much all that I would say of what people can experience in terms of other effects or effects other than body repair
Yeah,
or in the course of body repair.
it's reminiscent of other neurogenetic um, treatments, such as red light therapy, such as NAD infusions, where people who have some kind of chronic pain, these nerves, if unless you're taking medications that actually make them more sensitive, these nerves sometimes do not relay signals that well. So by repairing those nerves, sometimes there is like a spike in sensation before there is a subsiding sensation due to the repair process. So that could be, I mean, that is completely reasonable. um, yeah,
There
that's,
is,
I mean,
and there is another aspect here, Amite, which is I rarely have a chance to talk about it, but the topic is there, so let's do it.
yeah,
There is also something which is very well present in various field of medicine in France. This is where I learned about it. But the whole concept of compensation and decompensation.
yeah,
There are many things that your overall body will do to compensate for one aspect of your body that is not functioning properly. Let's take a very simple and kind of a ridiculous example, but let's say I put you a backpack on your right shoulder that contains maybe, I don't know, 50 pounds and carry it for a month. And
hmm,
everything, let's say 3 months, everything that you do to maintain your balance with that weight means that you shift on one side, your ligaments will stretch on one side, will probably shorten on the other side. There's just a lot of adaptation that takes place to maintain your center of gravity. The day that I take off that bag, suddenly the ligaments stretch on the other side and you start to have pain, on
hmm,
one side, pains that you did not even know were there. Your body now is decompensating. It's eliminating the compensation that was created by the problem.
yeah,
Decompensation is the cause of a lot of those like mysterious problems that show up when suddenly one part of your body starts to repair. So there's also, but it's mysterious, meaning everybody will compensate in a different way. There are some sort of great general explanation that we can give, but I mean, everybody compensate in their own way, and every problem have a memory in the body. The area adapts, and there is a memory there. When you start to remove the problem, the memory also needs to cleanse itself. All of these parts are part of the so-called healing crisis. So it's all of this happening, to different degree to everybody who actually repairs.
yeah. And I mean, we didn't even get. I 100% agree with you. And your example is way better than mine, because normally I give the example of compensation with athletes that use only half of their body, like pitchers in baseball or tennis players, and then what the repair process that they go through when they retire, basically, and they need to use their body correctly. So your example is way better. Also, within that framework, we didn't even talk about fascia yet, and the way that fascia really adapts around
Mhm.
an area to support gliding and movement in very predictable patterns. And then when you change those patterns, this fascial, um, let's call it contraction, needs to then adjust, and that obviously is a process that would stress the organism. It would stress the integrity of or it would stress the new movement in a way which would feel maybe uncomfortable. So I agree with you, and definitely we can see it in, if we equate it to the skin, we can see it over and over again happening when we cause repair, whether it would be, acne can overexpress itself when we're clearing out acne. We can look at when we are trying to balance hydration. Sometimes we need for the skin to be extra oily, or vice versa, if we need to balance hydration out in order to educate the skin. Um, many things we do. Obviously, we can take the lowest hanging fruit. If we did a laser to remove a hyperpigmented spot, because that pigmented area basically raises to the surface and then released, obviously it's going to be expressing itself more through that process. And a lot of people get a little bit scared when it happens, etc., etc., etc. And guess what? In all of those scenarios that I mentioned right now, our body still relies on its own innate processes and its perception of its ability to repair in order to know how many resources to invest in it. And that is why I think if someone does do those um, procedures, that's maybe I will end with that. That's maybe when they want to time taking extra stem regen in order to reap the most amount of benefits, because these processes are not completely understood. We're starting to understand them in longevity, but the perception of the body's innate ability to repair itself expresses itself in the quality of repair, and that is
Absolutely.
yeah. So, Christian, what I would like for us to finish with is, first of all, where can people learn more about the product? Where is this product available? Um, because again, this is the evil plan. The evil plan is people getting better results from our product, and the synergy between Stemregen and Young Goose is, I think, pretty clear, pretty obvious. So where is the best? How is it best being bought? Where can we learn about it?
So you go on our website, which is
Mhm.
kalyagen.com, Kalyagen. So Kalya is Sanskrit for young, vibrant, and gen, regeneration. So it's basically
Mhm.
the name come from what stem regen does to give back your body its ability to basically expresses, its youth and its vibrancy. So you go to the website and the product is available there. And I will just again restate something that we've talked about, Amite, but the skin repairs, like we talk about NMN, we talk about
Mhm.
telomeres, we talk about mitochondria. All of these are very important things to include into the whole realm of health. However, all of these aspects are touching an existing cell,
Yeah.
aging cell, whose time is actually counted.
Yeah.
That cell will not be alive for a whole lot longer. What you want is replenish these tissue with young cells that don't have the problems that you want to eliminate. So the more you replenish your tissue with young cells, the more you get rid of the problem that is resolved with all the issues of mitochondria, which is very valid. However, let's couple all of these together. Let's put more stem cells in circulation, and as you put these stem cells in circulation, they will go where your tissues are needing them the most. The skin is one of the most crucial one. All the actives that you have in your product will repair, will support the activities of the cells. But the moment you add new skin cells, new epidermal stem cells, the stem cells of the skin, then suddenly you just magnify the whole process. So,
I
uh,
couldn't agree
so I,
more.
I would I would love to hear stories from some of your customers using your product the moment that they start to couple this with stem regen. I would love to hear some of these stories.
I would even heuristically give an example of this inflammation and malfunctioning cells and the need for cells to split themselves to to proliferate is all like cycling uphill. So you're carrying that repair process uphill, and
Hmm.
the incline of the hill is the resistance of inflammation, malfunctioning cells, older cells. We will not be able to, you know, unless you're paying, tens of thousands of dollars. You you are still your mission is still to lower that incline, to reduce the friction, and that is why I think. I mean, the product is magical because it literally reduces the demand for those inflamed malfunctioning cells to then reinvent themselves, to then express themselves at their utmost capability. We're just bringing in, as we said, youthful players to the field, if you would. Yeah, that's why I'm very excited from this
You know,
conversation. Yeah,
this is a this is a full topic that we have not talked about. So it could be a topic for another
yeah,
time. But um, my colleague with whom we did all this work on stem cells, her main focus is on the fact that stem cells, more specifically mesenchymal stem
Yeah.
cells, are powerfully anti-inflammatory. They're probably the most anti-inflammatory part of your product, but locally,
Hmm.
not like glutathione, not like other antioxidants or anti-inflammatory compounds in the body, but very specifically in a localized area. When you have an injury, the stem cells is attracted to that injury. The moment that stem cells gets into the site of injury, you cannot repair with inflammation.
Yeah.
So you need to suppress the inflammation and then start the process of tissue repair. So stem cells are powerful anti-inflammatory small units that will go specifically to the site where you have the inflammation. So in that way, they play a very important role.
Yeah, I mean that's a topic we should definitely do another podcast about it, because this is a probably, we all know, or I hope most of us, anyone who listens to this podcast has heard me talk about inflammaging, the role
Mhm.
inflammation plays in aging. But very shortly, inflammation is part of the repair process. It is the signal for repair in the body. So the problem is constant inflammation, chronic inflammation, unresolved inflammation, etc. We should definitely do another podcast about it. I would say that all the information that we spoke about is information that will be in the show notes, together with parceling of the podcast. So if anyone wants to, go back and listen to a specific part, which I highly recommend, can do that. So Christian, again, we need to revisit, to do a deep dive into maybe stem cells and inflammation, or we can define it however we want. But I highly appreciate the time that you gave us. I learned a lot. I'm very excited to be a user of StemRegen. I highly appreciate the mission that you took upon yourself in life. And maybe the last thing I would say is that when I shop anything, I try to understand if the person, the creator behind the product or creators, are people that I would like personally. And I'm super blessed to, in that case, to be a user that also that I know that I just adore the people that are standing behind the product. So that is like my 2 cents about it. But yeah, thank you very much, Kristen. I will update you and anyone listening and looking at our Instagram about my journey with STEM Regen. And yeah, and I hope to have you again soon.
Thank you so much, Amite.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care.